Finding Mr. Bridges, the most fascinating man you've never heard of. Hopeless romantic, rock star preacher, leader of men, and parish priest.
Hello, my name is Phil, and on the 11th of January 2022, the Bishop of Warwick put his hands on my head, and he said,
"Phil, receive the cure of souls, which is both mine and yours, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit."
That made me the incumbent of 8 rural parishes just outside Rugby. At the time, I had absolutely no idea that 231 years before me, a man named Nathaniel Bridges had stood in St Nicholas's Willoughby, one of those 8 rural parishes, and heard those very same words spoken over him. I had no reason to know that because I'd never heard of him. And to be honest, dear listener, you've probably never heard of him either. But for reasons I will share with you later, I found myself becoming increasingly obsessed with this predecessor of mine from over 2 centuries ago. And the more I've researched, the more I've seen how we have very much walked the same physical roads in this world, from the roads we walked along as children, to the building we took our ordination vows in, to the pulpit that I now preach in. I've seen so many other similarities, but also staggering differences between the Vicar of Willoughby in the 1800s and the Vicar of Willoughby in the 2020s. So the process I went through to become Vicar of Willoughby was quite simple. There was an application form, an interview, service with the bishop, and then whack, I was let loose on 8 rural parishes, all in one whack. It's not so simple for Nathaniel Bridges. At the time, being a rector of 1 parish, let alone 8, was incredibly lucrative. So there was a rule you could only do up to 2. And at the beginning of our podcast, we meet Nathaniel Bridges when he is already the vicar of 2. He's the vicar of Orlenbury, and he is the vicar of Waddenhoe. So you could be forgiven for sitting there and thinking, sad times. If you want to be the vicar of Willoughby, you're going to have to give one of your other 2 up. But he wasn't willing to do that. And I think to explain why, I need to explain 2 things about the setup here. First thing is to say why he wanted to be vicar of Willoughby. And that's that he was in love with the daughter of the Lord of the Manor in Orlenbury. And if he wanted to ask her to marry him and then to keep her in the manner to which she had become accustomed, then he was going to need more cash. Willoughby was a much more valuable parish than the 2 he already had. So he needed to get Willoughby to have the income to ask this woman to marry him. So maybe he could have just got rid of one of the other 2 parishes, except that his father was his predecessor in both of these parishes. I think Bridges felt a deep sense of duty and honour was tied up in looking after these 2 family parishes that had been passed on to him. So he needed to find a way to be able to continue ministering in his 2 parishes whilst also picking up Willoughby. So he needed to do something a bit clever. And he found something a bit clever to do, but it required a partner in crime. Samuel Parr was one of the most renowned academics of the time. He was also perpetual curate of Hatton. Perpetual curacy is an interesting title because it's essentially the same as a vicar or a rector, but it didn't count in the 2 parish limit. It was also not quite as prestigious as being a vicar or a rector. So the 2 of them hatched a plot. They swapped. Parr became the vicar of Waddenhoe, whilst Bridges became the perpetual curate of Hatton. That meant that Parr had a slight status bump because he was now a vicar rather than a perpetual curate, and it meant Bridges now had an extra slot to become Vicar of Willoughby as well. They weren't going to move house or anything. They'd keep doing everything they were doing already, but on paper, they would swap titles because that suited both of them. It was a pretty clever idea, except for the fact that Parr was notoriously selfish, always on the lookout for money. He was incredibly thin-skinned and easy to offend, and he was just generally a very unreliable person to find yourself in a lifelong deal with, which is exactly where Nathaniel Bridges found himself. It took less than a year for things to start to get difficult in this agreement. Listen to an extract from this letter that Bridges sent to his friend Martin Roth on the 18th of July, 1782.
The great doctor and myself are on bad terms. His behaviour has been most unaccountable, and his letters rude and overbearing to the last degree. As to the half-year's tithes which I advanced to the doctor and which the farmers still refuse to pay, he has said nothing about the matter. He has got his money, but I cannot get mine of them, for I am not the legal rector of Wadden Ho.
So what is going on here? Well, it seems like what's happened is Parr, who was legendarily always short of cash, has borrowed some money off Bridges. And what Bridges has done is said, actually, I'll give you so much money, which is about 6 months worth of tithes from Waddenhoe. So I'll give you the money, and then I'll get the money next time I'm in Waddenhoe off the farmers, which is fine until Bridges goes to the farmers and says to the farmers, I need your tithe money now. And the farmers say, wait a minute, you're not the vicar around here anymore. Samuel Parr is, or we're only going to give it to him. So Bridges has gone back to Parr and said, they're not going to give me the money. Can you go and get the money and give it to me? And Parr has sent him rude and overbearing response initially, and now he's just ghosting him. So Bridges has actually been ripped off by Parr because he's given him a loan based on the tithes at Waddenhoe, and Parr is not making good on paying back that loan. It's 6 months worth of income that Bridges is worrying about. And this is just the start. Here's a letter from 10 years later, from 1802. And this is from Professor Ruth, who is the person that last letter was addressed to, their mutual friend. And this time it's him writing to Samuel Parr.
With respect to Dr. Bridges's affair, yet I am distressed very much, as you give me no reason why you're so much interested in his selling the next turn of Waddenhoe. All ecclesiastical traffic I have ever kept myself free from, and how can I advise another to engage in it? If you are to be benefited by the sale, I earnestly exhort you to drop all thoughts of the measure, and to take the chance of the provisions which may be made in the new act. If a friend is to hold the living for you, I have too much doubt about the propriety of the transaction, when all things are taken into consideration, to be instrumental in it.
So essentially, Parr has decided to try and sell Waddenhoe. So they've swapped parishes on the assumption that they're each going to stay where they are. And now 10 years later, Parr has decided he's going to sell the one that he legally owns and that Bridges is doing the actual ministry in. It looks like Parr didn't actually manage to sell Waddenhoe in 1802. It looks like Roth managed to put a pin in that, but that wasn't the end of the wheeling and dealing and the issues that they faced. Have a listen to this letter again. It's from Bridges to Roth, and this is from 1809, so a few years later, and they're still at each other's throats.
I have
received a letter from John Bertrand saying the doctor will have no communication with me on account of my behaviour. Whether he was offended at my nominating a fourth commissioner or no, I cannot tell. In short, I cannot conceive what has given him offence. In his last letter, he hints that I have no right to officiate but once on a Sunday.
So Parr is the one that from day one ripped Bridges off by taking a loan and not paying it back. And then 10 years later, he was trying to sell Bridges' family parish for money. And now something has happened that has made Parr act like the wounded party. He sent Bridges a letter by a friend saying, basically, I'm not going to speak to you because you've offended me. And Bridges doesn't know what he has done to offend Parr. And he's written to Martin Ruth to try and get Ruth to intercede and work out what on earth is going on. Bridges thinks that the issue might be that there was some paperwork came through from the bishop, and in it, Bridges named a layperson to act as a commissioner for Hatton alongside Samuel Parr, and he thought that might be what had offended him. But we have a letter that Ruth sent to Parr, which I think shows that Ruth knew what was going on, even if Bridges didn't.
Dear Sir, I write to you at the request of poor Bridges, who appears sadly afflicted in consequence of having offended you, although he solemnly declares he knows not how. He speaks of having added the name of Mr. Matthews of Warwick to a commission, lest an objection should be made to you as being the curate of Hatton. This, he first of all conjectures, may have given you offence. But I must take leave to reject this conjecture as a very improbable one. He next comes nearer the mark, unless I am myself deceived, and supposes that his officiating more than once on a Sunday, perhaps contrary to a long-established custom in your parish, may have been the cause.
Martin Ruth has seen through it all. He sees that Parr is actually upset because Bridges has been preaching in Hatton more than once on a Sunday. But interestingly, it is Ruth's wife rather than Ruth himself who replies to Bridges. And in her reply, she says,
Dear Dr. Bridges, to a letter which I hoped would prove conciliatory, Dr. Parr answers that he esteems and regards Mr. Bridges and that he wishes to live in amity with you. He proposes that there should be single duty as usual, that he should preach at the usual and regular time when there is no service at Hazley. He adds that if you do not comply, he shall be obliged to state the whole of the case to the bishop and his clergy. Surely, Dr. Bridges, these are very powerful reasons for a compliance with his proposition, particularly as it was originally agreed that Dr. Parr should remain curate of the parish.
the barefaced cheek of the man. Parr has defrauded Bridges out of 6 months' worth of tithes at Waddenhoe within a year of the swap. He's then, within 10 years, tried to sell Waddenhoe, Bridges parish, for cash. And having tried to sell the parish that Bridges was ministering in, he's then got uppity that Bridges has had the audacity to preach in his parish a few too many times for his liking. What's going on here? Famously, when Bridges did preach in Hatton, as soon as Bridges has left, Parr would stand up and say about the sermons that he preached, think no more of them, forget them, reject them. He would say that to his congregation as soon as Bridges left, having preached a sermon for him. So what on earth is going on there? It's a bully, isn't it? But I think we get an insight into why he's a bully. I think he's deeply intimidated by Bridges because he thinks Bridges is dull and he thinks Bridges doesn't know all of the new modern academic stuff. But actually, Bridges is a doctor of divinity. Bridges spent 25 years, best part of, as a fellow at Magdalen College, Oxford. Bridges was incredibly clever and sharp, and he was also a really powerful preacher. We'll see this later on in the series. He was a bit of a rock star preacher. He was a preacher people wanted to listen to, whereas Parr, on the other hand, was a bit of a boring academic. He talked with a lisp, apparently, and his sermons went down all kinds of academic rabbit holes. He'd go off on one about Plato and Socrates or French politics or whatever, and his sermons would go on for hours and hours. So his congregation probably sat through his interminably boring sermons delivered in a really dry, monotone delivery with a lisp. And then Bridges would turn up and preach a powerful evangelical sermon about a God who loves them and calls them to come close to him. And I think that drove Parr up the wall. Parr was the great intellectual of the age. He was known as the Whig Johnson. Everyone looked to him intellectually. When he was in a room with his voice, he could command the room just by sheer volume. But the problem was, whilst he knew a lot of Latin and he'd read a lot of books, he didn't actually have anything interesting to say. He was in love with the sound of his own voice, but his own voice didn't really have anything worth listening to. So it's no wonder that he was intimidated by someone who had something to say and had that quiet authority that comes from having a message rather than having a loud voice. This is such an encouragement for me as the Vicar of Willoughby in 2026, because as I look at my predecessor from over 200 years ago, he's left a massive legacy, which we will see in subsequent episodes. But actually, his legacy is based primarily on having something to say. And that, I think, is important for all of us, whether you're religious or not, because we live in a bit of a plastic world, don't we? We have to give off the right vibes, whether it's online, trying to give off the perfect Insta aesthetic on social media, whether it's at the school gates, trying desperately to show that you belong, you are worthy of standing here alongside the other families, whether it's at work, trying to be seen as a safe pair of hands, being seen as competent so that you might be considered for the next job, or at least not considered for the next round of redundancies, or whether we're retired and we're worried of appearing like we're going to be a burden to someone. We are under pressure to give off the right impression. And that was no different in Bridges' day. Samuel Parr gave off the impression of someone powerful and someone important. But underneath that was a deep insecurity as well. Next time, we'll be looking at his time in Oxford and how he found himself at the head of a movement that the college was desperately trying to stamp out.